Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the How to Draw Celtic Knots series. If you follow along with my posts here on YouTube, you'll know that I got a new graph paper journal recently. And if you don't, this is my new graph paper journal. And to start this journal off, I thought it would be a good opportunity to show you a technique that I use to help me come up with new knot designs fast. So without further ado, let's jump right into things. So we're going to start with the knots that got me into Celtic knots, which was the 3x3. So I will start here, and just like any other knot, we're going to start by making our grid. And for this grid, I'm making each unit a 2x2 of the graph paper squares. And when I split it vertically and then horizontally, you'll see we end up with that 3x3. And just like any other knot, the next step is the same, where we want to place a circle in the center of each one of these squares. But this is where you can save some time. And instead of trying to draw a perfect circle, just squiggle a solid dot in the center of each square. And then on the intersection points, except for the corners, just quickly put a circle in there. Now these don't have to be perfect. This knot is just for experimenting with different break lines to see if you like the knot. And if you do, from there you can go and actually spend a lot more time and make your knot more finished of a piece with shading and all that stuff. So for this first knot, there's not going to be any break lines. So this is just your standard 3x3. And this is the reason why I make the grid a 2x2 for each unit, because where there aren't any dots, see there's not a dot here, that's where your line is going to pass through. So I know this line's going to go through all these intersections. When I get to the corner, I'm going to wrap it around that dot, bring it to this intersection, and do the same thing all the way up. And there's another one of those elongated loops going this way. And then we have a circular knot that bounces off the edges and connects like that. And then what I like to do to get a better idea of what this knot may actually look like completed is to grab one of these calligraphy pens that has a chisel tip, and follow those pencil lines that I just drew in, and being careful to still follow the over-under pattern that makes a Celtic knot so interesting to look at. So this is also a good practice at following that pattern. If you make a mistake, it's not a big deal. We're just experimenting, trying to find a knot that we want to make a more polished version of. So that looks pretty cool. Now, I'll come a couple units over and we'll make a second knot. But this time, we'll add some break lines. So I'll just quickly divide. And for this knot, I will put a break line here. And if you're having trouble telling your break lines from your grid lines, you can use another color to do this to help it stand out, or do what I'm doing and just make them a little bit darker. Okay, now the first thing that I look for again is where a straight line is going to go through. I try not to start on a corner or an edge. So I'm going to pick this area here between all of these dots where I know that my line is going to go through. I hit a corner, I hit a wall, I hit a break line, wrap it around all that stuff. Wall, break line, corner, break line. And just follow the knot all the way through. And then use a different color this time. And now we'll see what this knot looks like. Now coming back in with this marker is not necessary. You can just go by the pencil and decide if you like the knot or not. But sometimes it's hard to tell with just the pencil, and I find adding this little bit of polish that's still really quick and easy to do can help me better determine if I like the knot or not. So I pretty much do this for every knot and break line pattern that I'm experimenting with. So let's do a couple more of those. And when you're making these grids, sometimes it's helpful to count in your head. I know I'm making a 2x2, so every time I pass one of these lines, I will count 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Or whatever method works well for you. We'll put in the dots. And then the circles. Okay. And just to show you what I was talking about earlier, if you're having a hard time seeing your break lines, if you're working in all pencil, you can grab a marker or a pen, anything with a different color to make your break lines stand out more. So this one we're going to do a square break line right in the middle. And immediately I'm looking for where a straight line's going to go, and I see this one right here. So that's where I'm going to start. And just bounce it around. That was a short one. All right. I'll do a different color again. I love these calligraphy markers. I found a really cheap listing on eBay with just like a ton of these colors. So they were used before I got them, and I haven't had a single one go dry on me. All right, that's 3. Let's do one more. And on this one, after you've been making these knots for a while, and especially when you're working with a simple square knot and you're not doing something more complicated, you don't have to divide your knot. So let me show you what I mean. Like, I know that that's the center, and we're putting solid dots in. And then I know the intersections are here. And once you get used to doing it this way, you won't have that issue of figuring out where your break lines are, because there are no lines on the inside of your knot. So for this one, this is another one of my favorite patterns. I call this one the windmill. Looks like that. Grab the perfect amount of different colors to do each knot. Oh no. I was just saying I've never had one of these go dry on me. This one is actually dry. Let me see. Here's my grouping. Guess we'll just do brown for this one. It might kind of look like the red one. I knew as soon as I said that I should have knocked on wood, but that's okay. Maybe there's a way to revive these markers. I'll have to do some research on that. So now we've done 4 3x3 knots, all with different break lines. They're all unique, and it didn't take very long to do. So what this allows you to do is very quickly experiment with different break line patterns, and maybe you say, oh, that knot is kind of boring, I don't really like that one. This one is pretty good. Oh, this one's really cool, I like this one. You know, it gives you a feel for the knot. So then when you want to do what we're going to do next is actually spend a little bit more time, make a nice completed knot. You have all of these reference points, so you don't have to experiment and maybe spend a lot of time making a really nice knot only to either not like it when it's finished or stop when you're halfway through because you're not liking the design. So it's really nice to have all of these done so that when you go to make your finished knot, you can just pick one of these designs, you know where all the break lines go, you know what it should look like more or less when it's finished, and it's just really a helpful time-saving method for making these knots. So what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to pick one of these knots and I'm going to make it. So let's do that. Now, so this is going to be our center point. I like to keep things really neat and organized. So with a 3x3, a 2 wide gap is not going to be able to perfectly divide our knot in half, I don't believe. It could if I made it this size. I guess I'll make each unit a 4x4. So we'll go with another 2 spacing, and I'll start at this point and I'll count out 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh no, that still won't work. I'll have to do 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this will all make sense in a minute if it's not. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this one I will divide. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and now we're making a more serious knot here, so you do want to take your time here and try and draw all of your circles as close to the center of each one of these units, and keep all of your circles as close to the same size as possible. And we do the intersections. If you can hear that rhythmic tapping sound, it's not a clock, it's actually the heat here. I don't know why it does that, but it does. So I'm going to make this knot here. So I'm going to put my break lines in, and I have them nicely referenced for me right there. So I'm just going to darken these lines and hope that that's enough guide for me. But again, especially if you're new to Celtic knots, use a different color or use 2 different pencils. Use a harder pencil to make your guides and a softer, darker pencil to make your break lines, because this is kind of confusing. And what I'm going to do to actually help myself out a little bit is just erase some of these lines. This is my new eraser, and it works pretty good. All right, so that's very clear. Okay. And now, just like before where I'm looking for a straight line where it's not going to hit any corners or break lines, I'm doing the same thing when I'm looking at this larger knot. So I'm looking for perpendicular dots where I'm going to connect the outside edges of the knot with my lines. And we can go ahead and start connecting these in a cross-hatching pattern, or you can do all of your lines going in one direction first and then the other to make your cross-hatch. But it's easier, and you'll be less likely to make a mistake if you alternate directions and make the cross-hatching from the start. And this line is not very straight, so I'm just going to come back, make it a little bit darker. And those are all the straight lines. So now we do our corners, and just like the fast version, you bounce them off these walls and break lines and corners to reconnect with itself. And this one can be a little bit fatter there. And sometimes your circles work out perfectly and you can just use them. Like for these loops, you can just follow the circle, and if you did this perfectly, you should just be able to follow the circle. But this is not perfect, so I'm having to make just a few adjustments. And sometimes I'm coming a little bit outside the line, and that's okay, especially on these less complicated knots. But where two corners come together, you do want to try and stay within the line to have your knot look as good as possible when it's finished. But that is the most difficult part of making Celtic knots, and is something that I'm still working on. So it's always a work in progress. There's always a new pattern to make, a new design to try. I've been doing this for quite some time. I'll have to do a journal review with you of my old sketchbook that's pretty much full, and just show you all the things that I've worked on. And I'm still learning and discovering new things. Now, aside from my new journal, I also got a couple new pens. These are really thick liners from the Sakura Micron series. They have a 10 and a 12. I believe the 10 is a 0.6 millimeter line, which is this top one here, and the 12 is a 0.7 millimeter line. And I'm going to use the 12 to come in and ink these outlines and see how I like it. And it's very smooth. It's really fat too. And I am going slow here. I will probably speed some of this process up. But if you're following along, take your time, go slow. You can't undo this. I'm really liking this marker. All right. And then I see I didn't fully connect this line, so I'll just come in and fix that. And now we will wait a little bit to have the ink dry. And this was really the main reason I looked into a new outline marker, because I was using a gel pen before and it took like over a half hour to dry, and a lot of times I would think it was dry and I would start erasing it and it would start making smudges. So these Sakura liners are supposed to dry pretty quick. So this will be a good test of that. Okay, it's been maybe a minute since I finished here, and I would normally wait a lot longer than that, but let's see how it erases. So far, so good. Let's see. Wow, I guess getting those Sakura markers is another good time-saving tip. Now, I don't know if this is coming in on the camera, but I can see that we have removed a little bit of the pigment on these lines, and I wonder if that would be fixed if I just waited longer before I started erasing it. But now, let me go get my really fine marker. This is another Sakura. This is the 005 micron. And this is super, super, super fine. And I like to come in and just add little lines just inside of each strand of the knot. And these pen tips are so fine, you can't put that much pressure on them or you'll break the tip. But once you get used to using them, they're really, really fun. Really fun. Something else that's really helpful when you're making these knots is rotating your paper so that it's more square with your body. And I don't do that when I'm making these videos because I don't want anybody getting nauseous. But when you're making these knots at home, and when I'm making knots for special occasions or cards, I'm rotating all the time. It just helps me draw straighter lines. But this channel is good practice at not rotating the paper and just rotating my body as much as I can instead, which definitely helps. Okay. And then what I like to do is shade the knot. And I also got some new pencils. I'll put their name up on the screen, but somebody recommended that I use a softer pencil to make my shading easier. And they also recommended to get some of these, what are these called? Stumps? Shading stumps. So I got a whole bunch of these. I got a 2B, a 4B, and an 8B pencil. So thank you for that recommendation. I was using a 2H pencil before, which I had to press pretty hard on the paper to lay down some good tone. And this is already a lot easier to get those darker tones. And yeah, we'll see with the shading stumps. I don't really have any experience using those. Get all those markers out of the way. I think I want to kind of do this. Now with these softer pencils, I assume I'm going to have to be a lot more aware of where I'm resting my palm than I have been in the past, because this will definitely smudge. So I'm just trying to get like a solid baseline down of tone and gradients. And then maybe I'll come in with an even softer pencil and try and push these shadows even more. All right, that's the 2B. Now let's try and step it up to the 4B. See what that does. Maybe I won't even need the blending stick. I don't know. If any of you are really good at shading, you know of any good resources for it, please let me know. Leave a comment and maybe link a video or tell me. Give me some instructions. I'd appreciate that. It is kind of hard to keep track of where I've come in with the 4B and where I haven't. So maybe it's not doing that much. But I can really feel the difference of these softer leads and how much less effort it takes to build up these tones. I really was pushing so hard into the paper before. Okay, now let's bring in some 8B. All right, try some blendings. Yeah, I just feel like I'm kind of coloring it in. But that's actually why I got this Tombow eraser to pull things back and brighten up these areas. And then I'll try coming in here with a fresh side of the stub, and just trying to feather that out a little bit. I think that looks better. Yeah. All right, I'm going to call that done. Definitely still have a lot to learn, but thanks for joining me in this episode. I hope this speed idea was useful and enables you to more quickly find knots that you love and want to turn into something like this. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.